Hi, everyone. Back with a new episode of With Love Solé. And we're going to title this one The Art of Holding Space. I was actually talking to a friend about this earlier, so I thought it would be a nice topic to bring to you all because I think it's really important to be aware of how you're showing up for other people and the world as, say, a high vibrational person or a space holder or even an alchemist, so to speak, right? Anybody who's sort of in tune with the subtle reality and in tune with the energies of things and in tune with their own energy, because I think all it really takes is being in tune with your own energy to understand your impact and to even be able to kind of adjust the atmosphere around you, so to speak, to like get the vibe, like be the bringer of the vibe. And I think it's important that we don't overdo that. Part of where this is coming from is because, as many of you have heard me talk about prior, I do think it's time we sort of retire like the empath archetype because so much of the empath comes from sort of that wounded space. A lot of the time, what built the energetics and the composure of the empath is having had a narcissistic parent. Like the narcissist and the empath are like opposite ends of the spectrum in this capacity. And so often the empath is the one who's already kind of highly sensitive and in tune with their reality. And even as a young child, was able to kind of like offer or lend their presence to, say, their parent or whomever in their reality was maybe not safe, even where they could kind of temper that by showing up in a certain way and offering kind of their goodness to keep themselves safe, really. And obviously, as a kid, and if you're already doing that as a child, like you're not going to necessarily learn as a kid not to do that. And it's important that as you mature spiritually and otherwise, that you retrain that from your tendencies because you don't have to lend yourself out. You don't. Even if you're the high vibrational person, even if you're, the one who's always has the overflowing cup. Now, that there is the marker for me personally that I've got to, at least this is where I'm at on my journey, that, 9 days out of 10, my cup is overflowing. And that is very much attributed to my spiritual practices and how much rest I get and how much I take care of myself and mind, body, soul, that I pretty much keep an overflowing cup. So obviously, if I'm in overflow, when I'm in overflow, which is most of the time, I have no problem feeding everybody because it's not even, nothing is coming out of my cup. It's just, you're just getting all the overflow from like the supercharging that I do constantly because that's part of what I do. But if you're not an overflowing cup, and so that means that every time you lend yourself out, your cup gets a little lower and a little lower and a little lower, that to me is like the kind of old archetype, the dying archetype of the empath, where they're constantly draining themselves to serve and support the world around them. And again, on some level, if it's a defense mechanism, if it's a survival instinct, like, okay, we understand that. And that's obviously important information about your environment, just as well as it is your ability to do that kind of thing. And if you want to maintain yourself and hold yourself to the highest caliber, you do have to retrain those tendencies. And it might mean that, for me, it was literally when I moved out of the house, right? That I like really got to learn like how to be in my own energy and how to not have to feel like I owe anybody anything or to manage anybody else's experience or to need to match energy if people need a listening ear or anything like that. Like that's not what I do anymore. I did it for a very long time. Of course, when I left my house at 17, went to college, like, of course, I was still very much learning, It wasn't until kind of like my awakening, so to speak, which for me was in 2012, that like I really kind of took on like, okay, I need to reframe how I'm showing up energetically so I can show up even bigger for other people. And that's what it is, because it seems counterintuitive that if you're only giving from overflow, that you actually end up giving more than you do if you're constantly taking from your own cup. But that has absolutely been my experience because my overflow is just so massive. It's like tidal wave energy, right? I literally can feed everybody just by overflow. And it doesn't have to be self-sacrificial because you are the big energy in the space. And so if you don't have overflow and you do have somebody who needs a listening ear or somebody who's experienced could obviously like have a little help being managed or cater to, or people please, all these things, right? The tendencies that we get into as the old empath archetype, that doesn't mean you owe it. It doesn't mean you owe it. To me, equal exchange is how do I keep my cup full and serve and support the world around me as much as I possibly can? Because again, this martyr syndrome, that like old paradigm, like you have to sacrifice yourself for the greater good, I don't know about that anymore. To me, it's kind of a cope because what ends up happening is you just end up drained all the time and you feel like that's a marker of success, but you're just drained all the time, which to me, that's not a marker of success for me. Now, don't get me wrong. I love a day where I get home and my head hits the pillow and I was like, dang, that was like, I did a lot today. Whoo, I did sessions, I did my YouTube, I ran it, whatever, I did X, Y, and Z. Like I had a full day. I feel good. I like gave everything I could to today. Totally different, right? Because I wake up tomorrow, I'm recharged, I'm refreshed, ready to go. I'm not going to wake up tomorrow, you know, dead tired or hating the world or feeling like people owe me because I didn't get the exchange that I was worthy of, or, because my exchange is active. I now actively require some sort of an exchange. And that's not just for me to be selfish, it's actually for everybody else too. Because everybody knows when you give someone something for free, they value it in a completely different way than they do when they've paid something towards it, whether it's time, energy, money, X, Y, and Z. It's different. You're actually offering them the opportunity to invest in something a little deeper than just to get it for free. Everybody knows that. It just is what it is. In fact, it's in the Reiki teaching that like the sensei who like Usui who learned all of this and brought it down from the mountain. And the first thing he did was like hit the streets and just healed everybody for free, right? And what he found is people would sit in his chair, take the healing, they'd like have this transformation, revelation, and then go right back to their like self-sabotages and the things that were creating the problem in the first place because they hadn't invested in it. So in the teachings you learn, well, as soon as he started asking people, how about like at least a donation? I'll put a little donation, people can pay whatever they pay. As soon as he started at least even doing that, there became this different sort of an exchange happening here. And that to me is what it's all about. We don't need depleted people, especially those of us who can even hear what I'm saying here and talk this talk. We don't need to be out here just depleted all the time, totally the sacrificing lamb. We don't have to do that. In fact, we are significantly and infinitely more powerful when our cup is full and we're supercharged, and then we're just supercharging everybody all the time. We go back home, we're supercharged again, we do the same thing. And it's overflow. It's overflow. You're not just pouring your cups, you're in the red and then you're kind of mad that this person, you kind of wish this person would have X, Y, and Z. You kind of thought this person might or reciprocate you in some way. That's kind of your stuff, honestly. And I had to learn that too, because I always thought I was like the nice girl because I was like so sweet and so considerate and so complimentary and always offering and always being the one to, I can do it. I can. Girl, the good girl has to tuck away sometimes. First and foremost, because people want to love you back. They want to give back to you. It actually is very healthy and helpful for the bond and for other people to be able to give back to you, especially when you're such a giver. So that, if nothing else, just for the sake of the bond and for the relationship and for them to be able to love you back, you have to be able to receive. But also, you don't always have to be offering out. You don't. And even if it's a space where nobody's offering out, perfect. Nobody's offering out. Doesn't mean that you have to step up and take the charge unless that is coming from overflow and you feel very clear like there's an exchange in that for you. But this is the key here. Finding the energetic exchange where you don't feel taken from, used, abused, brought down, whatever other experiences happen when you're pouring from your own cup constantly and you're just totally in the red when you get home and then you wake up and you're like can hardly function. You have to figure it out again. That to me is not like the highest caliber reality, and it doesn't have to be that way. It really doesn't. And sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is not give to them. Sometimes the best thing you can do for them is just maintain in your own energy and let them have their experience as a neutral witness. You don't have to take it on. You don't have to match their energy. You don't have to let them dump on you. None of that. You can just remain neutral, remain in your vibe, even if you're here and they're here and, there's a very obvious gap that you could fill. You don't have to. And it doesn't always mean that it's yours to fill. In fact, to me, that just offers them the rise. And again, maybe they need to figure out whatever they've got going on, and you're just the kind of perfect mirror to say, hey, it could be this way if you want it to be, but you got to figure that out first. And your presence alone is saying that, that's enough. So I think we have been conditioned to think that the giver is the better person in a dynamic of giving and receiving. But to me, that's actually not true at all. The one who has mastered the art of giving and receiving, the art of holding space, is the master. To know this person really, I could just, a little bit of energy to this person could really transform. I have it. I'm going to do that. Okay. A little bit of this energy to this person is like, giving money to someone that I know is just going to go buy what they don't need to be buying with it, you know? So that's the discernment. That's the mastery of it. It's not always being in giver, 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 giver output mode and thinking that that makes you the good person. It's nice of you, I guess, but nice is different than kind. Nice can be performative. Nice is sometimes a shield for the ego to hide behind to say that I'm a good person and I'm the nice person because I do all these things and I give all the time. But then you're kind of like rough to be around at times because your energy gets so low because you've just been sucked from all day long because you've allowed that to happen because you haven't required the exchange necessary to keep yourself upright. That, there's always kind of a shadow side to that. So the work of the highly sensitive person, the work of the alchemist, the work of the one who is in tune with a subtle reality, who notices the shifts in people's behaviors, even in a relationship where you're like, you can tell that maybe in a conversation you said something, you probably even know what it was, that maybe hurt their feelings a little bit. And you feel like you probably should address it and you've been present with that. And again, if it sits for long enough, address it. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with maintaining harmony in your relationships. But there is something wrong with you being the only one to maintain harmony in your relationships. We cannot carry anybody. You cannot awaken anybody. You cannot carry anybody. You cannot save anybody from themselves. You can only represent what it looks like to have been saved, to be awake, to carry yourself. And if everybody just carried themselves, boy, would we live in a different reality. If everybody was a full cup overflow, boy, would we live in a different reality. We're not there, but we can model what it would look like to be there. And the way to do that is to master the art of holding space, where you can be with people who are in a totally different energy, two totally different realities sitting side by side, and you do not have to manage, take care, babysit, or take on any of their stuff at all, because it's not yours. It's not yours. And in fact, also in the teachings of Reiki, that when you take on their stuff, when you lighten their load energetically, you actually reduce the suffering that is existing in the moment as their highest teacher. I think I've said that to you guys before. You are reducing, you are starving them of the lesson that's present under the suffering, under the heaviness of what they're going through. And as much as you want to help people, and if you have a decent heart, most of you's like, God, I kind of would like to help this person, naturally, right? Again, but the mastery is what is actually going to help? What does actually help look like? Because help is not always giving endlessly of yourself. That's not always help. Sometimes help is just presence, neutral witness. Anybody in the healing space knows most of the time that kind of thing just needs a witness. Just someone to see that like, I'm floundering in nothingness and drowning in nothingness. And there's someone here. There's a warm body next to me, confirming for me that I might be okay. That's all sometimes you need to do to help. So mastery of holding space, mastery of equal exchange, mastery of how help transforms and looks like in every different scenario takes that really rooted awareness where you're not in that like savior complex, good guy, cape, nice guy, helper, and you're in just the neutral of like, what is this moment asking for me, if anything? And sometimes it's not. You don't have to save the reality all the time, you know? And I think that's a really important thing to remember. And I think especially anybody who is a space holder of some sort, if you do events or groups, or even a leader of a team or a CEO or anybody who holds space for anybody, which pretty much everybody does in some way, shape, or form, even when if you work through the drive-through window, you're like holding, it's not yours. It's not yours. And you don't have to like constantly come down from like the high of the reality you've built for yourself through blood, sweat, and tears of facing yourself endlessly and self-mastery and then walking through the fire of like difficulty just because they're not doing that. and they need someone like you to save them, and they're better off saving themselves. They are. And that to me is like the higher help, the higher form of love. Sometimes lets people learn it on their own so that they know if this happens again, they can do it without you. There's not a dependency on the need for you or something external to save them from what they're learning and the transformation that they're going through. Imagine if the caterpillar who like actually physically kind of dissolves in the cocoon before it becomes the butterfly, that in the dissolve, somebody looked in, they're like, dang, I should like probably help this guy. He's like totally dissolved in there. Another bug like pops its little head in there. He's like, this guy is dissolved. Like, we need to call the ambulance. Something. It's like he's not even there anymore. He's like, what's going to happen? Imagine if he intervened at that point, the person would never become a butterfly. The person, the critter would never become a butterfly. So you got to take the lessons of nature and you have to understand the art of equal exchange and knowing when to give and what's helpful and when not, when just to be, when to stay in neutrality and how to get back to neutrality when you've left it. So, all right, that's what I got. Thanks for listening, guys. As always, let me know if there's anything you want me to talk about, questions, comments, feedback. It's good to be back. See you guys soon.